The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess uses a lot of examples that we've seen in our text to really add more to the dramatic tension of the game. And one that I'd really like to highlight is the way that the game uses the mechanics that you've previously discovered to add on to its boss fights. As most of us probably know, the Zelda series is an action adventure series, and each one of its dungeons, and sometimes in its larger games, in its overworlds, there will be boss fights that occur where mechanics are combined and used in unique ways in order to justify, the boss being more powerful. And for this game specifically, I'd like to focus in on the first boss fight against the King Bulbin, right after you've completed Death Mountain and the Fire Temple, when you get back down to Kakariko Village. As you come down from the mountain, of course, narratively, the first thing I saw when I was doing my playthrough, the first thing that you see is the King Bulbin comes rushing out right after you've called your horse, and he comes and he kidnaps a child. It's like, obviously, narratively, that's an escalation of the stakes just went up, because I just saw this massive monster come with an army of more monsters and kidnap a kid, and now I have to do my best to defend him. And then the game also escalates this dramatically with the mechanics. This is the first point in the game where certain mechanics have been combined in this way. As before, there's obviously points where you're required to be on horseback, as well as points where you have to fight other enemies on the ground. But this is the first point in the game where you're fully required to fight other enemies that are also mounted. And the game incorporates this as the combat mechanics themselves are relatively simple, but this is also combined with a bit of negative feedback in the way that there are other monsters behind you that are constantly being pulled towards you. You can't get away from them. They will always be a little bit on your tail, firing arrows at you, swinging their swords at you in an attempt to try to get you away from the King Bulbin, because that's who you need to do damage to. And over the course of time, they will progressively get closer. But obviously, it also wants you to manage your horse's dashes. If you dash too many times, you'll run out, you won't be able to catch up to the king and attack him, and that also gives all the monsters behind you a chance to catch up and attack you. And this really ties into some of the dynamics we see in LeBlanc's writings, especially with the literal rubber banding, the same example that he used in his writing to show off negative feedback. We see it here. And another instance that we see is in the second fight against the King Bulbin. In that fight, unlike the first one where you're using a sword while you're on horseback, it's a bit more complex. The King Bulbin on the second fight has acquired armor, which when I first saw it, I already knew that is an escalation of the game mechanically, because now one of my methods of attacking him is completely gone. When he has that armor on, you cannot attack him with your sword whatsoever. It won't do any damage, it'll simply bounce off. And the reason the game does this is because it wants you to interact with a new mechanic that it has just recently given you, and try to use the knowledge you have from the previous fight to incorporate that into this newer one. Whereas at this point, you have recently received the hero's bow. This is a bit after you've gotten the hero's bow in the game. You have to fight the King Bulbin again, and this time, instead of swinging your sword at him at the right time, as before, you have to shoot an arrow right through the gap of his armor, while also guiding your horse to make sure that it doesn't fall off the edge or bring you too close to him. If it brings you too close to him, that will send you careening off the edge of the map. And the fact that you can't, in most games, when you have to use a bow like this, they wouldn't, well, not necessarily that they wouldn't, but it adds on to it by making it inevitable. You have to take your shot before he reaches you. If he reaches you, you cannot stop yourself from flying off. And the game makes sure you have to do this while moving. If you get off of your horse, that just gives him free rein to charge at you multiple times. And similarly, you only have a limited amount of time before you pass him by or he hits you that you can fire your arrows. And that's really adding a timer to your actions, making it a bit more inevitable. It's inevitable that he is going to hit you or you are going to shoot him. You have to make that choice yourself as a player. And I think it really shows how good this game is at combining the boss fights with these mechanics to add to the dramatic tension by making it so it's like you have to do this. It's putting the onus on you to understand the newer mechanics it's offering you, as well as how they play into the old mechanics that you previously had to handle.